Right, we're live. Sound out there. You can just keep it here so we don't look at each other.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see that it actually is. Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, welcome everyone. I just thought we'd do a little Facebook Live to welcome Nate here. So we're at Hacienda del Sol in Costa Rica, and Nate's going to be taking over for a couple months. Really excited to have him. He's a movement specialist. He has a company called Fight Move Flow. Actually, one of the things that drew me about him was the emphasis on jujitsu. So that's something that I just started like a few months ago, and I've just become sort of obsessed with that. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about like where you're coming from, what your background is.
Yeah, so I probably started on my movement journey, officially started training and really diving deep into all these different disciplines a little over a decade ago, so maybe 2012, 2013. And it started out as exploring just a lot of different things, whether a few years before that with high school wrestling, and then after that with MMA and boxing, Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga and Capoeira and Parkour and all these different disciplines. And then I was just trying everything out, and then I came across natural movement, and was focused solely on that for about a decade. Natural movement fitness training, and it was basically everything in one, right? It's the whole picture of movement. And along that journey, so since about 2013, early 2013, so that's about a decade of movement. And then started jiu-jitsu in February 2015, so that's coming up on 9 years. And so with those two disciplines were the ones that really clicked for me. And just in terms of being practical and fun, and about efficiency, effectiveness, adaptability. And so in training all these different disciplines, I started to combine them in my own way. And so with Fight Move Flow now, it's basically that combination of self-defense practice, combatives, natural movement fitness, and flow training, whether that's with your movement or mindsets, being able to flow like water. So yeah, that's the idea of it.
So we were actually talking a few hours ago about sort of the difference between like functional movement, functional training, and like movement, which I thought was super interesting because you sort of like you hear, especially I've just heard about like functional movement as like the pinnacle of like fitness, and you think like that's the thing that everybody needs to do. Everybody needs to do like deadlifts and like hang cleans and like these CrossFit style movements that sort of become like this peak of fitness. But you were telling me a little bit about how some of it's actually not like super functional, and maybe it can be defined in a different way, but movement is the true essence of what functional movement really truly is.
Right. Yeah. There's a distinction between functional movement and what I could call practical movement. It's like practical skills you use on a daily basis. And definitely lifting and carrying, like all that stuff's of course practical. But with natural movement fitness, we kind of take it outside of the box. So for example, if you're only lifting a perfectly balanced barbell on a perfectly flat floor in a perfectly temperature controlled room with perfect lighting, when you feel good, and it's like in the perfect conditions, that's not realistic in terms of if we were talking about how every week we're gonna be carrying up our fruit from down the hill,
right?
And so that's a completely different lifting and carrying. It's gonna be lifting maybe up to 50 pounds, not that heavy, but the context is it's not balanced, it's uneven, we're going up a hill, it's every step is different than the last. It's humid as humid AF here. It's the conditions aren't perfect, and they're natural, right? And so they're perfect in that sense. But you know, so taking it out of the gym, we'll definitely train in the gym. We'll work on our skills in the gym, but we want to take it outside of the box and become more adaptable with our movement.
Yeah, yeah, and that like little hike we do, like from the retreat center up to the staff house, it's like less than 10 minutes,
Right.
but I mean, sometimes it can feel
Yeah.
way longer than that.
Yeah.
It's like pretty steep, it's uneven terrain.
Yeah.
Like you really, I guess you're working like, some balance, you're
Yeah.
working on like maybe even some core strength. I've actually noticed if I go down the hill or go up and like my core is not super activated, I'll just kind of like have to use the rope. There's like a rope
Yeah,
to get up there, and I'll have to use it to hold on.
Mm-hmm.
And if I keep sort of like a little bit centered,
Mm-hmm.
I can go up without having to touch anything.
Exactly.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So okay, so that's how it all started. So then let's sort of go through the FMF, so the fight move flow
Mm-hmm.
of it. So let's talk a little bit about the fight aspect of it.
For sure, yeah. So fight is heavily influenced by jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Gracie Jiu Jitsu. I have been, again, like I said, training for 9 years, and trained all different gyms, all different styles, whether it be, the MMA approach to jiu-jitsu, the sport approach,
Mm-hmm.
for competitions, or the self-defense, the more Gracie Jiu-Jitsu style. And that's the one that resonates most with me,
Mm-hmm.
is the self-defense side of it. And so I've been training that specifically um, for about as long as I've been training jiu-jitsu, whether studying it and applying it at the gym that maybe didn't have that same approach, but I was still learning it and applying it myself. And then went through the Gracie University instructor program a couple years ago, and I've been one of their certified instructors for a few years now. And yeah, it's just the most efficient approach that I've seen, seeing all these different styles. And it so that's heavily influenced there. And then I also take inspiration from other things, other martial arts, um, and movement combatives as well, taking principles and techniques from these things. But yeah, primary focus, jujitsu, and self-defense focus, whether that's you have your rolling and sparring, but first is technique, and standing technique, and focusing on mainly jujitsu versus non-jujitsu, right? A lot of like competition and sports gyms, they focus on jujitsu versus jujitsu. When in self-defense, it's like 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to go against someone who's trained in jiu-jitsu. And if you are, you're probably going to realize it pretty quick and then shake hands like, yo, where do you train? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, you don't usually get people who train, don't usually get into fights. They avoid confrontations, because you understand the reality of combatives and self-defense. So training against an untrained individual is going to be the most likely scenario, and the most likely behaviors of an untrained individual is just throwing punches at your face, right? So how many times when you're training sport BJJ do you think about, can I get punched here? You know what I mean? It's like you might really like playing bottom half guard, but it's a pretty solid position to get punched in the face from. So it's like, you're just keeping these things in mind. And that's kind of the Gracie University approach, and what I really like to integrate and share as well.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I've heard a little bit about. It's this hyper focus on competition is like not necessarily setting you, like, it can be great as a sport and it's like awesome, and like the few months that I've done, I love it, but that focus on just competing, I feel like you can get some sort of negative habits out of that then maybe you get a false sense of confidence. And then you go out into the real world and like now you feel like you're the shit, and it turns out not so much. So that's super interesting.
There's definitely videos of like white belts, for example, getting into fights, and people recording it, and you can see like they've trained a little bit, but not enough.
Yeah.
And so you'll see like, this white belt trying to pull someone into their guard without having proper punch block awareness or technique. And just being on the bottom of guard, just getting hammered.
Yeah.
Those are the fights. It's like they thought they knew enough, but
right. Or those people that are like in guard and then they just get picked up and like slammed.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
horrible to see those videos,
man. For sure. Yeah, and then there's just understand the principles of connection and disconnection can help a lot there too. But fighting, to continue on that, doesn't only include the combative and self-defense. If you see on a few of my posts or videos, like I'll hint at the fact that fighting doesn't always mean that. It could also mean fighting your inner bitch, like getting into the sauna when you don't want to, or cold plunge when you don't want to, depending on where you're at, of course. Sometimes restorative is the focus and not pushing yourself too much. But that's an option. Fighting gravity, right, with our movement, being able to jump higher or farther, vaulting objects, like that's also a part of it. So it's not always like the physical fighting, it could be mental or emotional, things like that.
Well, in terms of movement, sort of shifting gears a little bit, like what would you say are like the big exciting things for you in the movement world?
For movement, I see there's always like new gimmicks coming out, and none of it really excites me. It's like you see these new things, hyper focused, basically natural movements. And so like when you have this natural movement lens, when I started training parkour over a decade ago, it's like we called it PK vision, parkour vision. And you go out into the world and you see everything as an obstacle that you can overcome, or everything as something you can train on or with. And that expanded when I started training natural movement, because then it wasn't just urban environments where parkour is mostly trained, but it was in natural environments, and it wasn't just moving my own body, but also moving other things, lifting, carrying, throwing, catching. We have a section of aquatics and combatives, so it just expanded that vision more, to see everything as an obstacle. Common phrase is the world is your playground. So everything is an opportunity to train, and that's my approach, is like training is life is training. So with all that being said, nothing outside of that really excites me, because it's like I've seen it all before. And so you'll see these whatever, maybe it's like knees over toes, or some functional patterns or something. It's like they're just like isolating things down, which is cool. Some people really need that. And it's hyper specialized, but in the bigger picture, it's just like a small piece of natural human movement.
Right.
What does excite me, what I do like watching, is just high level jiu-jitsu, and I like seeing people training self-defense. I like seeing high level parkour athletes, high level natural movement athletes, nature, barefoot, jumping tree to tree, or people like scaling buildings up and down. That stuff excites me. That's what I
like athletic type movements.
Very like we were saying, practical, not necessarily functional.
Got it.
Because functional training might be balancing on a Bosu ball with one leg while holding your phone and picking your nose with your finger. It's like, cool, you're doing a lot of different things. What's the practicality of it?
Right. Yeah, so it sounds like your method, your philosophy is more holistic than maybe other people that do choose this narrow focus. We were talking about Ido Portal the other day, and that's something that I've seen as like an outsider in the movement world, and been like, oh, that's like kind of cool. But then sometimes I'm like, what is he talking about? And a lot of people comment on his post. I don't know if anybody knows Ido Portal, but and I wouldn't be able to explain like his whole philosophy, but it's very very philosophical. It's very much like you said, it can be a little bit alienating
Mhm.
to a lot of people who don't understand it, who aren't immersed in that world.
Mhm.
So it can be cool, I guess, for practitioners who like sort of know the language a little bit, but it's not accessible.
Mhm.
And if it's not accessible, then at the end of the day, is it functional? Because can anybody just go and pick that up?
Mhm.
We had a client the other day who weighed, you know, over 200 pounds. And, you know, we went into the yoga hall and Nate was explaining to her how to do crawling. And at the beginning, I was like, he's gonna do crawling? Like, all right. I mean, I trust him. He's the expert. But the way that I had seen crawling is like in all those sort of Instagram videos or in like the social media world of these crazy movements with your body. And I was like, how is that going to work with somebody who's 200 pounds and has back issues or has like, you know, all these chronic pain? And you were still able to figure out a way to make that accessible for her.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big part of the training approach too, is progressions or progressiveness, being able to progress any movement skill. And that goes both ways, right? Being able to regress it down to the simplest form or progress it to the most advanced form. But you know, in the grand scheme, the things we like to have everything be a progression. So you always start with the base level and then go up from there. Instead of like, you know, showing this person who's probably never or hasn't been on all fours in 30, you know, 20, 30, 40 years and trying to do some crazy flow handstand, you know, makaku or something, like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's about bringing it back to the basics, back to the foundations. And yeah, you know, it's a lot of systems are, again, hyper specialized, and I don't want to be specialized. That's what insects are for, right? So I want to have
Who says like Naval Ravikant? Have you heard that?
I think so. Yeah. I forget where it came from, but I've heard it many times. But yeah, so the approach is generalized. You know, having a good skill level in all the movement domains, whether that's you know, walking, running, jumping, crawling, lifting, carrying, throwing, catching, balancing, you know, aquatics, combatives, you know, those are the general movement domains. And within those, each of those domains, you can break it down into tons of, you know, techniques. And so basically having general movement skills across the board level, not, you know, like most sports, for example, a football player may be really good at throwing or really good at running, jumping, or you know, lifting, but maybe not the best balance, or maybe not the best climbing, right? Rock climbers, best climbers in the world when it comes to rocks, but maybe, you know, expanding that to be climbing trees, climbing walls, and then not only just climbing, you know, balancing, ground movement, you know, just being able to like move your body in any way possible and not be so rigid in one domain. And that's where imbalances come from. And so you see, you know, climbers and jiu-jitsu athletes have this posture, you know, they start to look like this, you know, rounded over, around back, because they're always pulling and, you know, here versus, you know, opening up to other movements. And, you know, when it comes down to it, ground movement really is the foundation. And so it's nice to see these other domains like Ido Portal, or maybe knees over toes, or animal flow and things, incorporating these ground movements, but then you know, it doesn't stop there. And there's, you know, a lot within each of the domains.
I like how you explained the crawling the other day to that client, because, you know, it's true, like we all started crawling. You didn't hop out of the womb and you just ran a 5K. Like you crawled for a while, right? And it took some time for you to learn that. And just because we've gone through that phase before in our life, well, maybe it's been, like you said, 20 years where we're sitting at a desk all day and we're super sedentary. What makes you think that you're going to be able to do all these complex movements right off the bat? Right. So going off of that, what do you think? You mentioned one of the foundations is the ground, right? What other components do you see as being sort of foundational in anyone's movement practice?
Yeah, another, of course, the first foundational thing is breathing. You might be able to move really well, but now form that same movement while holding your breath and see how long you can do it, right? Good test to see how important breath is. And so we're like, yeah, well, of course, I don't hold my breath when I'm working out or moving or performing tasks. Well, actually, some people do. They don't realize it for a little bit, just for shorter periods of time. And then right before they fail or pass out, like, oh, I forgot I was breathing.
That was jujitsu for me the
Right.
first like 3 months.
Yeah, jujitsu is a great example of people not breathing because they're in that fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
But then, just a step beyond that, maybe you are breathing, you're not holding your breath, but your breathing isn't efficient, or you're not doing it efficiently, properly for what the task requires. Whether you're in your sympathetic or your parasympathetic phase, whether you're chest breathing or belly breathing or both, or so breathing is the foundation for all movement, and it's another thing that's pretty neglected in a lot of high level training.
Got it. Yeah. So moving into the flow, I guess briefly, what does that entail?
Yeah, so flow training for me started out with parkour, doing more sequences of movements and then combining them together into a flowy nature. And that was always my style when I trained. When I trained movement in parkour specifically, was a more flow approach to it, not like this hard style of just big movements and then nothing else. Is more, my approach is always to be more flowy with it. And when you see someone move and you see a real fluidity to their movement, it just looks good. And the reason it looks good is because it's efficient. You can't have flow without efficiency in your movement, right? So that's those two things go hand in hand, and efficiency in movement is one of the goals, right? You want to be first effective with your movement, then efficient and adaptable. And so, like I said before, effectiveness is pretty clear cut. It's a yes or no. Were you able to complete the movement or not? Efficient, you're going to have 3 outcomes. You're going to have greater safety, greater energy conservation, and greater performance. Then adaptability, like we said, that's taking it outside of the normal training, outside of the gym, into nature, trying it on different trees, climbing different trees, the same technique, or in jiu-jitsu, doing the same move against different body types, different skill levels. That's adaptability. So yeah, that was always my idea, is to be fluid with my movement. And to do that takes mastery of the individual skills, but then you need to start connecting the dots. So there's the physical component of it, there's the mental side of it, being able to connect the dots, being able to connect the movements together and have control, body awareness. All these things are a big part of it. And a big part of flow too is just being mindful and mindfulness training. So all of that plays a key role to it.
Man, that's fascinating. We were sort of talking the other day too about how when you get into like the world of nutrition, it's a little bit like learning a new language.
Yeah.
You get into the world of like fitness, sort of feels the same way too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Movement literacy. Yeah, movement literacy. Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yeah. So do you have anything else that you feel like you'd want to add in terms of the fight, move, flow philosophy?
Yeah, and then of course, jiu-jitsu athletes, so it started out with parkour, but once you get into jiu-jitsu, that's another approach to flow, right? But that's where you get to flow rolling. And watch a black belt's flow roll versus a white belt's flow roll. It's like, you know what I mean? it's a clear sign of efficiency differences, right?
Totally.
The white belt's like super rigid and and the black belt's just like, yeah, super chill and boop, oh, I could have tapped you there, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just keep going and flowing. And so yeah, flow I think is an important part of training as well that um is missed out either early on in your training, of course, because it takes time to become proficient in it, or in your type of training. If you're only doing lifting, you're probably going to be pretty rigid, pretty stiff, and not be able to flow. You're just very stiff. And on top of that, just like we don't like to leave out any movement domains, that's already a step above what most people are doing, in the sense that bodybuilders are just lifting and focusing on certain body parts. So it's not even focused on different movements, but they're not even focused on their whole body. And when that happens, you're basically building strong links next to weak ones, right? You focus on your biceps and your triceps, and you get really big and strong there. And then you're neglecting your elbow joints, your shoulder joints, and people get stiff and they get injured. Very common to see that.
Yeah, so it's not like cohesive, like something like an animal flow type movement.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So it's not incorporating the whole body.
Got it. Okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So with the fight, move, flow philosophy, you mentioned you're going to be doing like a retreat in July, right?
Yeah.
Tell people a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Fight Move Flow actually started as a collaborative retreat with my buddy Jonathan Lang in Colombia. That was, I think, 2 years ago now, 2021 or 2022. It had to be 2021. And so that was the first retreat we did out there, where we collaborated on this idea of combining, jiu-jitsu and self-defense and combatives and natural movement and animal flow, because he's animal flow certified. And so combining these three disciplines mainly, and then that was the start of it. And then from there, now it's becoming not just a retreat, but workshops, online coaching, brand. And so just expanding on that idea. And now we're just scheduled our second retreat, Fight Move Flow retreat, again in Colombia, this time July 2024. It's going to be July 10 to 15. And so again, 6 days, 5 nights, Colombian jungle at a retreat center out there. Very much like this out here now. Very nice, in the jungle, nature. And both of us will be, again, going over the Fight Move Flow approach and philosophy. And yeah, it's super fun.
Great. Well, where can people find more information about that?
Yeah, so fightmoveflow.com. I'm on Instagram, mainly Facebook, YouTube, and stuff. But you can find more info there, fightmoveflow.com, and you'll see up top the retreat link. And yeah, we lay out the whole itinerary, what's included. And this year we got a special collaboration with Redmond Rail Salt. And so the first 5 signups get a care package from them.
Oh, nice.
That's one of the bonuses. And then we got other bonuses on there you can see. But yeah, it's super cool to work with them. And yeah.
Sweet. So also, in addition to that, Nate is going to be here for the next couple months.
Yep.
I'm still going to be here at Hacienda for 2 more weeks. So I doubt anybody would just book and then come here within a week. But if you do, you'll still be able to work with both of us. You'll be able to work with Nate until, I think, mid to late January. Yep. So we are doing a burnout recovery retreat. So mainly focused on restoring people from a state of burnout, whether it be with gut health, whether it be with sleep and insomnia, whether it be with body composition, with overall the sort of ravaging chronic stress that a lot of people do experience. That could be a great opportunity for anybody interested. So highly recommend you check that out. I will let's see. I'll link to Hacienda's website. You can check it out. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Let me check both of these things here. Yeah, we'll do a quick Q&A here. Oh, someone said can't see you in Facebook. Well, now we're on Facebook. We're also probably going to upload the recording of this to my podcast, so anybody that just hopped on late can get access to that as well. All right. Well, there are no questions. Oh, what would be the best way to improve balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So starting out, of course, like we talked about before, breath is the key to all movement. So when you do get to balancing, I always tell people your breath is the number one indicator of how well you're going to balance, right? Breath and posture. And so as far as training goes, it starts simple. It can be just standing with your eyes closed. From there, we move to one-legged training and moving around the opposite leg, trying to disrupt our balance intentionally, right? So because the concept when we're doing balance training is not, you're not trying to never lose your balance, right? You're going to lose your balance. The key is to regain it as quick as possible, right? So when you're training balancing, you're intentionally trying to lose balance at times and then regain it without falling, right? And so that can be done on a single leg. And then one of my favorite training tools is a 2x4. You just bust out the 2x4 and you can work on your posture there. One of the most common inefficiencies with people is their posture and their breath, holding their breath, having unnecessary tension throughout their body. That's a big one. But yeah, and then getting into your posture, your breathing, moving forward, backward, working on reverses, high, low, and that's all at the ground level. And then to progress it from there, you just start raising it up off the ground. You start narrowing that balancing surface from 4 inches to 3 or 2 or a rail. Slippery. Maybe it's rain that day. Maybe you're up in a tree 6 feet up, 8 feet up. Maybe you're on a playground, right? So there's lots of ways to progress it and lots of adaptations, and then that's only focusing on balancing, right? Then you can combine it, right? Then you can start doing carrying, balancing, throwing and catching, balancing, crawling, balancing, running, balancing, right?
So again, like with the crawling analogy, you're always sort of working from the bare minimum that you can do, and just lightly, like progressive overload, basically.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, but yeah, starting out, without any equipment, without anything, you could just stand up right now, put your feet together, and close your eyes. And that's a good test to see where you're at. If you can't do that, then you have something you should probably get worked on. That's a simple test for people to see where they're at and if you should be working with balancing at all.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So the simple test of just standing with your feet together, closing your eyes, seeing where you're at with that. Maybe like focus on the breath a little bit as well. What else do we have here? Movement training, how many minutes or hours per day?
Good dry throat. Yeah, that's another great question. So for a movement training approach, I always say it's better to do smaller sessions and higher volume instead of doing an hour a day, 3 days a week, super intense. Do lower intensity sessions, 5 minutes, 10 times a day, for example, right? Or 20 minute sessions a day. Just like a little bit of movement I like doing a morning movement routine, a lot of ground movements, but lower intensity, higher frequency is the approach. But that's, I would say, the base, the foundation, and then if you want to progress, then you can start getting into higher intensity things.
Got it.
And longer durations.
Okay, got it. Let's see. When breathing, the best is to fill the abdomen all the way up or chest.
So again, context matters, right? Most of the time, your abdomen, doing belly breathing, and belly breathing isn't just forward and back. We talk about 360 breathing, and it goes beyond that to treating it like a balloon and doing all directions, so not just front and back. Belly breathing, most of the time, that's going to be your parasympathetic, rest and digest, calming. But if you're doing sprints, you might want to do some chest breathing.
Right.
You might want to do more intense breathing to get the job done. So there are times when, you want to really get yourself going, sympathetic state, and fight or flight. But most of the time, abdomen or belly breathing.
Got it.
Good question.
I actually had a question on that. If nobody else has a question, have you ever seen like the Boss Rutan like O2 trainer?
Yeah.
Like you like breathe into it and it's like resistance and it's supposed to like train your abdomen.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's probably great. I've never tried it. It's probably a great tool. I have other tools I use to train my breathing. And just living in Colorado, at elevation.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Going up into the mountains, that's a great training. Natural training.
Okay.
But I mean, I would try it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Sure.
I think the thing with that though is it does make you do mouth breathing, which if you're only doing for a little bit isn't a big deal. But mouth breathing has a bunch of negative side effects, right? Versus the nose breathing. So you don't want to do that too often. And that's why I do things like mouth taping at night to ensure I'm not breathing through my mouth in my sleep. Things like that. But another great training tool I like to do is put kettlebells or have a person stand on my stomach and breathe. That's the challenge. Obviously, progressive training, start with real light, just learn the breathing technique first, the proper breathing first, and then you can start adding light weights, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, work your way up. I regularly do 50-pound kettlebells. If I have a person, I'll have them try to stand myself.
Damn,
just around my body weight.
Okay, that's intense. I'll have to try that.
It's a good challenge.
Okay, cool. Well, does anybody else have any more questions? If not, then I think we're gonna call it for the day.
Awesome.
Welcome, Pura. All right, great. Well, thanks everybody, and have a great night.
Awesome. Cheers.